Hey, what's up guys? This is Brian at Brian's Tech Therapy. Thank you so much for joining me. This video is on the follow-up of the Value Electronics 2022 TV Shootout, King of TVs in both the 4K and 8K category. We all watched the shootout. We had the winners and we had the losers. But I'm here to provide the one thing that was missing from that shootout, that is context and perspective. Hey, what's up guys? Thank you so much for joining me. This is a tech therapy video. These are long form, non-scripted discussion videos, and the discussion will be on the winners and losers of the Value Electronics 2022 King of TV Shootout, which has been finished for 2 weeks now. It's about 2 weeks. I am on vacation with my family. Thought this would be a nice backdrop. I hope you guys are having an amazing summer. Now, 2 weeks after the shootout, all of the commentary I saw either during the shootout and in various videos and comments in of our videos and all of the discussion, this video is to provide the context again and perspective of somebody that was there. A lot of comments, a lot of commentary, a lot of criticism from people that were not there, knew very little about the shootout. So I'm here to not defend the shootout, but again, give it proper context and perspective. It was a wonderful event, again, held by Value Electronics, both, or I should say Robert, Wendy, and their daughter, Leanne, the 3 team members of Value Electronics. Excellent event. It is their 19th year. And in saying that, in the 19th year, we'll start with our first perspective and or context. This is not a Sony event. They've won the last few years. However, in 19 years, they did miss 1 year. So I believe this would have been the 20th year had we not missed last year, the year before, due to obvious reasons. But Sony has only won 3, I believe. I believe it was the A95K QD-OLED this year, the A90J Master Series, as well as the A9G Master Series. There might have been one more winner, so it may be 4 years, but 4 years out of 19 is hardly something I would say being fixed or being sponsored by Sony. There are winners in the past have been Panasonic. Samsung won a number of years. And even 1 year, Sharp won. I think it's the first year that an LED won back in the day. A lot of plasmas, a lot of Panasonic plasmas. But again, proper context. I'm hearing Sony wins all the time. That is not accurate. Again, giving you perspective. Now, you'll see in the video underneath, there is my footage from the shootout. There was, I believe, the YouTubers that were there, or influencers, is me, FOMO, Stop the FOMO, Brandon from Be the Installer. We also had Cecil from Keep It Classy, as well as Shane Lee of Spare Change was filming the live stream. Now, the first bit of perspective from me was, as Shane films the live stream, it is pretty static, meaning it is there to film the event. Now, while it's a live stream, we were not active in the chat this year. Last year, we did do a golf chat, we called it. We talked about what we saw. All of the influencers there spoke about what we saw from each panel. We had more competitors this year in the 4K lineup. I will list them. We had the Samsung A95B, the Sony S95K, the LG G1, the Sony A95K, and the Samsung A95B. So what we had was QD-OLEDs going against the G2 and 2 mini LEDs. Now, the first thing I hear is that why no TCL, why no Hisense, why no Vizio, why no Panasonic? Context and perspective. I did an interview with Robert Zone 2 weeks before the shootout. That was explained, but I'll bring it up again here. All manufacturers are invited to attend. It doesn't mean they have to submit panels. Robert and Value Electronics would buy those panels. They would update them, calibrate them, and have them there. Panasonic is also no longer in our area. It's been quite a few years that they haven't been in the US for us to even have. Robert was one of the only retailers in the country to have their Hollywood reference OLED monitors 2 years ago. He has a very good relationship with Panasonic. They were asked to attend, meaning he does want their permission to put them in a shootout. They declined. You cannot win if you don't play. Now, that will probably be an HDTV test. Vincent, his shootout, which is in the UK, I'm sure Panasonic will be in that one. There's tremendous value to both the Value Electronics shootout and Vincento's from HDTV tests. You should watch them both. But as far as we're concerned, if Panasonic's not there, you can't win if you don't play. TCL did not want to be there. Hisense was there last year, didn't have anything to show this year, though their new panel just arrived. I highly doubt it would have been in the shootout. Vizio has been there in years past. So you can't win if you don't play. But we had Samsung, Sony, and LG, and all three were represented this year. Their engineers were there. And like any other competition, guys, that has judges, there is a subjective winner. You are watching humans watch these displays. They are not YouTubers. They are not influencers. They are from the industry. They are from Criterion. They are responsible for transferring 4K Blu-rays. I will not release their names. I will interview some of them. They were not also the calibrators that calibrated the panels. For me to be a judge, I was not a judge. It is a conflict of interest. Why? I handled these panels. I helped assemble them. I helped get them there. To me, I have no business being a judge, which is why I wasn't. But we were missing the perspective that we provided last year. That is 100% on me. That's something I should have done this year, whether on my own channel or on Shane's channel. I will say 6 minutes in, watching some of the commentary in the live stream, it was extremely toxic. And it was all about, hey, tech therapy is needed because the G2 sucks and this panel sucks. And oh, I knew this thing was garbage. And what's interesting is I didn't see a lot of our communities, shared communities, from the influencers that I mentioned even in that chat. So the year before, we were able to do what we called a golf chat, which means we were kind of talking about what we saw. Now, why do we whisper? Well, we have judges in front of us. We can't influence them. Many of us know these panels more than anyone else simply because we've dealt with them, we've seen them. Even Caleb Dennison from Digital Trends, who was the MC, was there to move the show along, to outline the show. He was not there to give his perspective or opinion, and he did not. So it was really up to the judges. But to say that those judges are influenced by me or anyone else off of YouTube or even Value Electronics is something that's simply not accurate. Context and perspective. On the judging, you will see in much of the footage that is picture-in-picture throughout this video. Again, that's me filming. You'll see the judges, how they are viewing them. Again, the calibrators were not involved. They might have been there to give clarity in regards to Dwayne Davis, Jason Dustle, John Reformato were there. They calibrated all these panels. They would have been there to answer questions in regards to what features are on, what features are off. Again, all were calibrated. You had the BVM Sony reference monitor in the middle. So they were really there to answer questions, meaning they got the fighters ready, they got the fighters trained. And other than that, the judges did have specific questions. Is this motion on? Is this processing on? And they were also there, Dwayne Davis especially was there on hand. You guys know him as D-Nice, with the remote to show that everything was above board, meaning something like live color wasn't going to be on. Certain motion settings had to be disabled. So that's why the calibrators were there. Other than that, the judges didn't talk much to each other. They weren't just sitting back and watching. Now, what you have is Shane in the back behind the judges. Then you have the judges. Each one has to then go to each panel, make sure they're dead center, they take their notes, and they watch these panels critically. What they're looking at, what they want to see for each criteria they're trying to cover, every part. Now, what I bring perspective on is you as a consumer have to ask yourself, do I watch TV the way these judges do? So my concern will always be the viewer at home. What do you think? And as you're looking at these judges, and I did speak to quite a few of them after to find out what they did, and also speaking on us not doing the commentary, which I should have done this year, and again, I apologize for that. I will promise to do it for you next year, is I was there selfishly wanting to talk to the engineers. I wanted to meet those that work at the companies, get their thoughts, and then after hours speak to the judges, get their view and what they did for a living. In reality, I should have been there telling you what I saw, because if you're watching the footage that I have picture in picture, you're seeing the panels up close in 4K versus seeing them far back in 1080p in a wide view. Shane's equipment is top notch. However, the stream is 1080p and you are relying for Wi-Fi and things of that nature. Plus the perspective of what Shane brings is he's showing you the entire event. Now in the event, other than Caleb, Robert, and the panel you saw where they discussed 8K, 4K, we talked a lot on those panels, dealer scope speaking, the sponsors, you didn't get our perspective on what was on screen, what we saw from each competitor. That's what was missing and what we should have provided and what I'm here to provide for you now. Now, I'll also be doing a follow-up video on this with Brandon, be the installer, FOMO, and Classy. We will share what we saw personally. So again, keep in mind, judges from various fields in film and in that industry, not influencers, not people that work at Value Electronics, none of that. All influencers are there on their dime. No one is being paid to be there. So putting that to rest right now. But what I also want to say for you guys watching, I heard in the comments a lot, oh, if you have a G2, you definitely need tech therapy. If you have this, you definitely need this. In reality, what I want to give you is the perspective of what I saw. More importantly, and I would always say to you guys in the comments, or what I think is being very confident in your purchases. You do your research, you watch a bunch of channels, you read a bunch of reviews, you're checking out the big three, you're watching all this, you get your, you do all your research and you make your purchase. I want you to be as confident as you can be in that purchase. If you're even in the shootout, you win. Every display in this shootout deserved to be there. 8K had the LG Z2, the only 8K OLED had the Z9K mini LED Master Series, as well as the Q900B Samsung mini LED, also beautiful. Those three went at it. And then, as I mentioned, you had two mini LEDs versus a W OLED, which is the G1, or I'm sorry, the G2. I might have said G1 before. Then you had the two new QD OLEDs. So perspective, the A95K won. For many of us, it was the clear winner. But I will tell you, the Samsung S95B had the craziest ride this year. Again, perspective. I was there with FOMO when he unboxed one very, very early on. I was blown away by it. I reviewed it, spent time with it, blown away by it. It was then updated several times, so lost some of its peak brightness, changed the image, made it more accurate. But the perspective of that, I soured on the S95. Seeing it right there with the A95K, which is brand new but had more time to cook, has the heatsink, the S95B was right there. Just as good, and some thought it was better. So the fact that it came in second is actually a win. Why? Because it delivers nearly the same picture quality. It is a much better value. The A95K has a better build quality. It's the heatsink, it's a brand new, it's a Master Series, it's $1,000 more expensive. But the S95B coming in second place, as far as I'm concerned, puts it in first place in terms of value. Again, you guys buying these panels, to me, is what's important, that you have the confidence in what you buy. So even though the S95 has been nerfed, so to speak, from what it was, that may be to protect the panel. But the fact that even it being nerfed or changed or made more accurate, no matter how you want to say it, at the end of the day, compared to the winner, the A95K, it was right there. That is where perspective helps. Now remember, as we mentioned, you have judges. They're human judges. Do they watch TV the same way you do? You'll see in many of the shots in the video accompanying this video, you have them looking at the pixels. I kept asking how many carats were there. They were really hung up on this and that. The criteria, is it perfect? Maybe not. Will it be updated and changed every year? Absolutely. But they are looking at it from a purely human way. I heard no talk among the judges that they were Sony guys or Samsung guys, anything like that. I heard nothing about that in 2 days. But I did watch them spend an unbelievable amount of time in front of each shot. They all made sure they were dead center. If anything, it slows the shootout to a crawl, but there is more critical viewing done by them in that testing than you might think, even watching the stream. Watching the stream, you're talking to each other, you're typing, and then you're looking up and all you see is a bunch of guys in front of the panels. I'm there on the side, watching them take notes, asking questions. Now, the questions you didn't really hear on the stream are constantly asking the calibrators, hey, you sure this is this? Are you sure? I'm not sure. So they were questioning every single step. There wasn't this mindless, I don't know what I'm looking at. Those guys knew what they were looking at and what they wanted to see. Got a bug here. So, perspective, the S95B, crippled, crushed, updated to oblivion. At the end of it, ended up being right there with the king of TVs this year, the A95K. Right there, nearly indistinguishable, even though it has Samsung's trademark look. To me, the S95, I would love to have seen how the S95 would have done if it was when it released, but if it is about making that panel last, and if that peak brightness is no good for the panel, it's still a win because it looks just like the A95K in many ways. Also, it's cheaper, has a ton of gaming features, their optimizer and other gaming features, and again, it's cheaper. Total win for the Samsung S95B. LG G2. I may have called it a G1 several times in this video. I mentioned again, they are non-scripted. The G1 was the big loser. That's what I heard constantly in the forums, not in the forums, I'm sorry, I don't read the forums. In the commentary that we all kind of glanced at, we said hello, we didn't really partake in that. It was pretty toxic, but it was G2, told you it's terrible, it's awful. Now I have plans myself to buy two panels that I'm going to be trying, and one of them is directly because of the Shootout, which is the Samsung Q900B. I was so impressed with seeing it in person, more impressed than I saw it in store. It makes me want to take it for a spin, and perhaps I may buy that. The G2, you would think, and this is what I meant about being confident in your purchases. Nothing I saw in that Shootout makes me think anything less of the G2. However, that's not what I'm hearing echoed by many of you. This is what I hear echoed. Was going to order a 77-inch G2 due to the commentary, meaning the comments, forums. I'm definitely going 65-inch S95B QD-OLED. I will tell you, in my opinion, that is a massive mistake. There was nothing from the G2 in comparison to the QD-OLEDs where it was beaten, in my opinion. If anything, even though we do comparison videos, we have them 1, 2, 3, 4. There's something about having them all lined up, having them all calibrated. You are seeing them in a very different light. You're not, at least for us, you're not seeing them on YouTube. You're not seeing them compressed. You're really getting a chance to see them. The things that the G2 scored low on, I think was SDR motion. Once you tallied it up, regardless of whether you agree with the criteria or not, it came out with a very low score. So even though they measured very closely, and in times I thought the G2 looked better, once you tally the scores, again, even in fighting or UFC or boxing, that score can get very lopsided. You can have a couple rounds in fighting that are very close. They give it to the other guy at the end of the fight. You're like, wow, this wasn't close at all. That was exactly where the G2 stood. To me, it looked better than the A95K and the S95B in certain scenes. To me, it looked brighter. It had more HDR impact, which is the way I watch panels. I watch in a dark room. This shootout is done primarily in a dark room. This year we did have the windows open so everyone can see how they do in a more a brighter room. Perhaps next year we'll do something brighter so the LEDs have more of a shot, because they truly shine in a brighter room. But the G2, I have reviewed it. I've spent countless hours with it. Seeing it in battle with the QD-OLEDs, not in my own comparisons, but in a very large room, and really watching them for 8-9 hours, I want the G2 now. If you have a G2, you should be very, very happy. Well, I hope you're happy with it, but don't let anyone dissuade you or make you think like your panel isn't any good now. Same with the S95B. You shouldn't feel like, oh, no, I got the crappy panel. I've seen people in the comments say, well, I have the G2. Oh, you got the G2, what a loser. Don't let that stuff affect you. That's just noise. And the why I'm coming at you a little aggressive on this is the commentary about the shootout from people that have never been there. Some of the people that have commented or gone after the shootout have also never seen these panels live, have never seen an A95K in person, never seen a Z9K in person, never seen a Q900B in person. Now, why is that something I can confidently say? Well, many of these panels aren't in store anymore. It's a shame you can't go to a Best Buy and see the highest end panels anymore. I have the privilege of seeing them and watching them and being able to bring that to you. That is a privilege. But the commentary from sitting back here and either watching the shootout that way or killing the shootout or saying this is crap and that is crap, how can you say that if you've never seen them? It's a big reason why I don't really review a lot of TCL and Vizios and Hisense these days. They're not there for me to see. I can only comment on with specificity on what I see. I can give you my thoughts on Hisense and what I think they're doing by what I've heard, but I can't give you any real analysis unless I can spend time with them. So a lot of that noise is just noise. If you've never seen them or you've never seen them together, you've never seen them apart, kind of hard to listen to the toxicity in that regard. So for me, the G2 is a stronger competitor for me, regardless of how it did in the shootout. Lastly, for 4K, the X95K and the Samsung QN95B. Now, these were clearly separate. They were actually together. The way the lineup went, in case you didn't see the live stream, it was S95B, A95K, BVM reference monitor, G2, X95K, QN95B. QN95B is a brand new panel released. It is their true flagship. It has the one connect box and the same processor as the Q900B, meaning it's a step up from the QN90B. But where I want to talk about the X95K and the QN95 is they have flip-flopped throughout the year. Again, the TV year is followed by many reviewers, the larger reviewers, the smaller reviewers. Many of us love the QN90B in the beginning of the year. I personally have the 43-inch QN90B. I love the panel. Very little blooming at all, a lot of saturation, awesome, a lot of gaming features. I love that little 43-inch. I love that 43-inch more than I do the QN95. Now, I don't know if it's because the QN95 was a late entry. I have a hard time with Samsung this year with the numerous updates, meaning even when I opened that panel and did a video on it, I had to update it for you guys because I have no idea what you're going to get at home. When I do these videos, that's why I do a lot of out-of-the-box settings. I want to show you what you'll see at home. If you're not going to calibrate it. And again, this goes back to the judges. If you're not there looking at a calibrated panel, they're looking at a calibrated panel and they're leaning more towards calibrated panels. You have to ask yourself, do you like that image? Do you like the processing? Do you like, let's just say for Sony, with the X95 and even the Z9K, I enjoy live color in HDR. Some people like motion interpolation. Some like to use black adjust. All that stuff disabled in calibration to look more like the BVM. Now, the BVM is phenomenal. I mean, one of the best things you'll ever see. Again, it's a reference model. It is used in filming. You have to look at that image and say to yourself, do I like that image? That image to me is nearly perfect in regards to looking so much like a plasma, like a CRT plasma in a way. However, does it wow you? You'll find, at least in my opinion, watching the BVM, and if I had a 85-inch version, it's accurate, it looks real, but does it give you the specular highlights? HDR impact is so important. You'll hear FOMO and I constantly discussing HDR impact. What makes you go, wow? Wow, whoa, wow, regardless of the content. Also keep in mind the judging and the content provided is really not the content you're going to be watching at home. It is a lot of patterns. It is a lot of motion tests. Even the film paused, is that the films you watch? That's what you have to ask yourself. The Shootout has so much value, but you have to think with the winners and the losers, there is no losers. There is which one you would prefer. Now, the X95K, I reviewed the 85-inch in the beginning of the year, and there was a lot of criticism this year with the 65-inch X95K from many reviewers. The blooming out of control, terrible panel, this, and that, absolute garbage. This one is better than this one. So we'll get back to the QN90 in a second. So the X95 was included in this Shootout simply because Robert Zone included it. It is the 4K flagship, but we already have a 4K flagship with the QD-OLED. Robert wanted the X95K in the Shootout, and he wanted it at 65. Now, all the 4K TVs were 65s. There is no hiding anything. The fact is, we were confident in the 65. If we didn't, it would have been very easy to say, oh, not the flagship, we're not putting it in. 65 inches, it's the weakest size, we're not putting it in. But it was there in all its glory. Same with the QN95. Now, the thing with those two panels, was blooming a problem? No comments on the X95K's blooming at 65. None. Now, it's had updates. They've all had updates. VRR is available. Its local dimming has improved. I can attest to that having the X90K. Probably the opposite for the QN95. I think the QN90 looked a certain way in the beginning of the year. I'm not sure it looks its best now. That's the risk with having that panel, either as a consumer. And if you have the QN90 or the 95, please share with me what you think of that panel. Leave your opinion on how yours is, because it's hit or miss. Some updates affect it. Is it a hardware? We've covered that. Again, FOMO and I've covered that. The A95B, the QN90B, love that panel. The 95B to me wasn't quite as impressive. The X95K was clearly brighter. And blooming, non-issue. What was the issue though for the mini LEDs? Why didn't they score as high? Why were they so far apart? They were actually closer to the G2 in scoring. Again, perspective. Perspective. I don't think they were close image quality wise. The G2 was closer to the QD-OLEDs, but what was the difference? Well, I'll tell you the difference from being there in person. When you look at these panels, all 5 of the competitors, in years past, and even those of you that are familiar with plasma, if you walked into a showroom, it was very obvious what was an LCD, what was a plasma. When OLEDs first came out, thinking C7, it was very obvious that's an OLED, that's an LED. This year, not the case. ABL was not showing up. And I believe ABL was disabled, and people say, well, they shouldn't disable it. Disabled because the images were paused for critical viewing. But the point of the matter is, you didn't see them look less bright than the much brighter LEDs. The QD-OLEDs and the G2 are bright enough now to where it leaves very little opportunity or advantage for your LEDs. That is the challenge LEDs are now facing. They are not cheaper anymore. They don't offer a higher contrast ratio. They don't offer more anything other than they survive or do better. There's no burn-in, and obviously they perform much better in a bright room. So what separated them wasn't blooming, in my humble opinion. What separated them was contrast ratio. Where they stood above sometimes was an HDR impact. Obviously, the X95K was much brighter. The QN95B were much brighter. However, on small specular highlights, the QD-OLED and the G2 did better, meaning little lights, pieces of jewelry, things of that nature. So where I felt they were falling back was it was obvious in terms of contrast ratio, not blooming, which again is perspective. All I hear, X95K, absolute garbage, bloom box. I've heard it from this person, this comment, that comment. Well, doesn't mean this person's not accurate. Could be a sample. I don't know what it is. I didn't experience that. A lot of other reviewers did and didn't. Per panel, who knows? But listen to those that have spent time with them. Interesting thing, and I will be speaking to Caleb Dennison about this, is even professional reviewers. Hard for them to review panels as they're being updated throughout the year. Did the X95K improve? I know it did. Did the QN90 not improve or fall backwards? I wasn't quite as impressed with it as I was with the Q90B. But the narrative, the perspective is it wasn't blooming that held it back. If there's anything blooming wise, obviously off angle, there's blooming. There's also color shift. You were seeing the colors degrade off angle versus the OLEDs, which you'll see a lot of the images I'm showing you, but that's not what the judges were looking at. There wasn't an off angle viewing criteria. They were all dead center and they spent equal time with each. It took forever, as a matter of fact. But we will be talking about how is it to review panels now if they change throughout the year. The QN90B came out. A lot of our guys loved that panel. Within 3 or 4 months, it wasn't the same panel. I don't know where it is now, but my QN90B is still awesome. And I actually have a video on that coming up versus the new and improved X90K. But perspective, where was the blooming on those panels? Not really around bright objects. Where you saw anything was, it reminded me of hotspots that you'll see in projectors at times. You would see an image and you would see the face would look a little bit washed out. That was the blooming that people don't really look at. They look at haloing around bright objects, they look at black bars. What was obvious was the contrast ratio. The black level within image, within skin, within materials of clothing. That's what you see on the OLEDs. That is what's lost on the mini LEDs. For me, I wish we had the time to do an out-of-the-box shootout to show how these LEDs would run wild if they were able to put in some of their settings, or maybe do some more HDR impact and bright room performance, and I think they'll score much higher. So closing down the 4K lineup, A95K is the winner, S95B second place, third place G2, fourth place X95K, fifth place QN95B. That is what the judges saw. I do agree the A95K was in first place. The S95B, I think, again, its journey, the value perspective, the fact the image quality looks nearly identical in many ways, to me shows it's a much better value. Seeing how the G2 did, considering it's now old technology, only made it more valuable to me. I'm also going at the larger size. Many of you are now at the 77-inch class. I cannot recommend at all going with a smaller panel thinking that you're going to recoup better picture quality. Seeing them next to each other, I did prefer the G2 in a lot of scenes. If we did more HDR impact, I think the G2 comes in second place. Who knows? But then they gave you my thoughts on the mini LEDs. It wasn't really a blooming issue, more contrast ratio for me. Now moving on to the 8K. I know this is a very long video, but again, I'm giving you what I saw when I was there. The Z2, the successor to the ZX and the Z9, third generation. They did not have a new one last year. The ZX1 last year pretty easily versus the Z9J, the QN900A. It's the contrast ratio again. It is very deep. It is 88 inches. It is just the random size that OLEDs are. If we were doing a 75-inch glass, they would be 77. I don't know why, if it's the mother glass or the yield, but that's the size that it is. It went against the Z9K 85-inch Master Series, amazing panel, as well as the Q900B 85-inch Samsung. A lot of the footage you're seeing is from that 8K shootout, and I was amazed by it and actually preferred the 8K shootout to the 4K shootout simply because it was more about HDR impact. It was more about HDR. Where the 4K, I felt like there was, maybe because it was the first day, we covered a lot more. I felt like the 8K was more rapid. We simply ran out of time to compare the 8K Z2 to the A95K. The Z2 won the 8K shootout. If you did not know that, it should have won. It just seemed to have more color. It was much richer than the other two. Again, it was 88 inches. It's also $30,000, or at the time of this video, $27,000. It has a power supply that is this big, and it's extremely heavy, the power supply. It's just on a whole nother level. Now, speaking with LG, I did ask if there was a special sauce being done with that panel that isn't done with the G2. I assume there was maybe a different, I mean, it's a different panel, meaning it's 88 inches, but I assume there was something different being done because the Z9, the ZX, and the Z2 were clearly above any 8K panels before it. However, I was assured that there's nothing special being done, but the color gradients and the 8K resolution does work in tandem to yield a richer image. So perhaps 8K does help with color gradients. I'm not sure. I'm not the engineer or the scientist, but it definitely yielded the best image. Now the Z9K, which was clearly my favorite panel of the year going in, the one I looked so forward to, the backlight master drive, it was clearly the brightest by far. Its HDR impact is immense. The problem I had with the Z9K this year, and I'm not sure if this is due to calibration again, guys, I don't always love a calibrated image. Remember, the Z9K I spent time with and the one I filmed, I was there giving you standard out of the box, vivid, cinema, custom. I'm showing you the whole spectrum. It looked a little dull to me. It didn't look quite as colorful as I know that panel to be. It looked a little flat in spots. It was very bright, but very bright was a little bit of a problem for it. It was almost too bright. I felt in some scenes it washed out more than I've seen it in person. Again, I think the calibration does in that way perhaps hurt it. Again, I don't always agree with that image. I think a little live color, a little black adjust, and it would blow everything away. But again, it's calibrated. Can't bring those tools in when you want to. So the Z9K to me was not what I normally have seen from it. Again, a little less colorful and perhaps so bright it was to its detriment. Now the Samsung Q900B, I always call it the QN, it's the Q900B, really impressed me. What really impressed me with the Q900B was its color. It is quantum dot. It was very saturated. Now, though in theory it has a wider color gamut than the LG's contrast ratio gives it that depth, and the color can only make up for it so much. However, seeing them in person, getting right up in the middle, the Q900B surprised me many times, to the point where I definitely want to test drive it, get it home. We do have new GPUs coming in the fall where 8K is a thing for NVIDIA and AMD, something that we don't care about 8K until we do. And I think we're almost there, at least from a gaming perspective. I am curious to see how Samsung's processor handles our regular content, our Netflix, our Hulu, Amazon Prime, HBO Max, our 4K Blu-rays, and our Xbox and PS5. So for me, perspective, the Q900B, I do not love the build quality for Samsung's lineup this year in regards to even the QN95B. It has kind of a paper back to it and it's kind of flimsy. They're all made from recycled parts, which bravo, but it doesn't have the steely feel of the 900 TS from a few years ago and that glass feel. So to me, they don't feel quite as premium. They sound great. The Z9K is clearly a more premium product. It is also, at this point, $3,000 more expensive at that size. Perspective is same with the 4K. You have higher contrast ratio with the 8K Z2. Easily the panel I would rather have. Again, where you have to put cost into it is, again, they're all flagships, is which one would you buy? The Z2 is far and away way too expensive. And honestly, I wouldn't even want the Z2 simply because LG is putting a lot of work into their 8K lineup next year with a new lens that they're going to add that's going to make that panel brighter. So a very hard sell for an 80-inch Z2. If they want to give me it, I'll take it, because to me that still is the best looking panel. But for me, the Z9K with the bells and whistles disabled got hit. Again, that could be just the panel. And here's the thing, guys, though they were all QC'd, they were not cherry picked. They were, you found good ones and then you calibrated them. It wasn't like they unboxed 5,000 of them. So it could be that one suffered, one didn't. Same with the QN95. But the Z9K, to me, even though it is due to get the VRR update to help with its local dimming and in gaming, the QN900B, due to the Shootout, and I think it came in 3rd place. So the fact that it was the 3rd place winner, and I'm more intrigued by it, is perspective. That's all I'm really offering in this video from somebody that was there. Key, I was there. I wasn't paid to be there. I'm not paid to do anything. I am there on my own dime. I pay for my own room. I am not influenced to say anything. I show you what I see and what I think. And I share that with you. But the toxicity in comments is nothing new. The toxicity in forums, nothing new. But keep in mind, at this day and age, unfortunately, because so many of these panels are not available to see in store, they cannot comment on what they have not seen or experienced. Now more than ever, rely on those that were there. Not saying to listen to them, but rely on to their perspective more than those that are jealous from the background saying, ah, that's garbage. I can see it from here. Meaning the camera was 20 feet back in 1080p showing you the entire Shootout. Next year, we'll be filming them. I'll be there showing you. We will have everyone mic'd up. Many of us will be mic'd up to share our perspective. That was on me. I did not do that this year. I apologize. I promise next year I will do that myself. We will all have us mic'd up. You'll get every influencer that is there. And again, we all have different perspectives. We don't all agree, and that is the best thing. But we can disagree and go back and forth without calling anything garbage. Lastly, special thank you to Robert Zone, Wendy Zone, Leanne Zone. It is incredibly difficult to put on these events. To Dealer Scope, it is incredibly expensive to put on these events. There are judges, the calibrators, the venue had to be moved, things had to be pushed back. And again, those other competitors, those other companies that you keep talking about, those value brands, they were invited. Vizio and Hisense, I'll bring it up again, have taken part in the shootouts. Panasonic won many of them. We're not keeping anybody out. Watch Vincent To's UK shootout. I wish Panasonic was there. Panasonic is probably the only brand that always gets a pass with me. I was a plasma fan. One of my favorite panels of all time are plasmas. But perspective, and perspective is needed, and that's what this video is for. To me, there were no losers. To me, the LEDs are pushed farther back simply because OLEDs continue to evolve. They are brighter than they were. They are cheaper than they were in terms of you buying them. The G2 is still pretty expensive. The C2 to me is nearly as good, is very affordable. There are more options. That is why OLED is pulling away. Mini LED, maybe the criteria will change. Maybe we will go after HDR impact. But contrast ratio is always going to be king. But I was there showing you. We were there showing you, but now I'm here to give you perspective. Again, special thank you to Value Electronics. Again, it's a lot of work. You have no idea how hard it is for them to do that on top of their business. And also, they don't need me to sell TVs. The relationship works excellent. I get access. I film the products. That's something I can show you guys because no one else on this platform, and I can say this pretty confidently, can show you some of the panels that I can with their help. But this shootout is a huge event. It is a ton of work. I thank them, but I am not here to defend them. I am simply here to give you perspective on what I saw. I will follow this video up next week with Brandon be the installer, FOMO from Stop the FOMO, and we will have Cecil from Keep It Classy on here to share their perspectives. Like any competition, You will have winners and losers. However, like runners in the Olympics, even the last place runner is still an amazing athlete and deserved to be there. And they only lost by this much. That is perspective. None of them are garbage. None of them are crap. None of them are not something that you would want to have in your own home. And also keep in mind, a lot of the commentary, a lot of the ha-ha, this sucks, are people that don't even have 4K panels yet. A lot of them are back in the day commenting, this sucks, that sucks. Don't get caught up in the toxicity. I'm not new to the platform. I'm used to being hated. I'm used to being criticized. I'm not here to defend myself. I'm not here to defend the Shootout. I'm simply here to give you perspective. The perspective is it's an amazing event. The perspective is it's been 19 years. It would be 20 years. The perspective is Sony's only won a few times out of 20 years. That is perspective. That is context. And that is the reality. Thank you so much for watching. I am Brian at Brian's Tech Therapy. Let me know what you think in the comments. I have lots of videos coming up. C2, G2, Z2, X95, Z9K. We're going to be revisiting a lot of these panels, gaming on a lot of them, and we will also have in store more intimate shootouts. Let me know in the comments what panels you want to see face off. Do you want to see more of the Samsung? Let me know. We'll make sure that it happens. Thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Love you guys. Take care.